Good evening from Germany to the global crowd. Hello, dear audience and visitors of the second Martin-Roth-Symposium in 2020. My name is Sarah Bergh, talking to you from Munich, Germany, with many thanks. To the organizers, I have the pleasure welcoming you all at the end of each day of this so very interesting and wonderfully composed conference. The Future Forward sessions closes each day of the symposium with a conversation between a forward-thinking professional and a student responder, maybe a critical eye and ear. In short conversations, we wish to wrap up some of the inputs and topics of the day that the two guests have been following and that they will kind of summarize from their own viewpoints, and with the focus of the day that is futures today, power tomorrow, followed by entertainment and architecture. With our thoughts, we hopefully will be able to grab essentials, maybe touch hidden agendas, and serve as handovers for the next day. So thank you for joining us. And my greetings go over to Düsseldorf and Berlin. Hello to Eva Karl and Alain Bieber. With a short introduction, Eva Karl, she is a creative strategist and graphic designer working at the intersection of design, arts, and culture. As creative director of an art gallery and blogger, she visited artists, art fairs and museums, and practiced through for interviews about the gallery of the future. And in 2019, she decided to widen her knowledge through studies of art and visual history, as well as cultural history and theory at Humboldt University at Berlin. The insights at the interdisciplinary course Curating Emerging Futures, combined with her personal zeal, inspired her to start the Revelator. And you might be talking about this later, a toolbox for more relevance in cultural institutions worldwide. Revelator.org. And you've already met Alain Bieber, of course, cultural manager and curator and executive director of the cultural institution NRW Forum in Düsseldorf. Alain Bieber has been curating solo and group exhibitions all over Europe, and topics such as street art, net and media art, political art, and photography. So thank you for your participation to the two of you. So at the end of this first day, and as we heard, visioning museum futures can't ignore digitalization, integration, and decolonization processes that take place globally at the moment. We have to put to consideration that, of course, context matter when we follow the main challenge of cooperation and the broadening of cooperation. At the beginning of the lockdown, a theater director put it that way in one of the first online events that could not take place in present. Maybe we should keep the theaters closed, he said, and send the actors back onto the streets to experience where performance came from originally. For instance, the marketplaces. So, well, theater performance is live art, your discipline, presenting art within buildings, you could say, has been challenged as well. So, Alain, maybe at the beginning, how easy, or better, how hard is it to digitalize curatorial work?
I think it could be quite easy because most of the things it's not a rocket science or something. The problem is sometimes that a lot of museums, and I think you heard this already in the other talks, are very heavy structures, very bureaucratic. Like mostly only the director is changing every 5 years, but the rest of the stuff is there for 10 or 20 years. And then change management in general is always very complicated. So it's a lot of work. People from the inside the structure, they always need to be willing to work on the change, and people from outside need to push, encourage, and develop the possibilities. I think this is for all kinds of fields the same, like for digitalization.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So, if you, like I already mentioned, you did your research, and in combination to this, would you agree? Is it not that hard? Is it easy to put it up in the digital world, on the internet, on social platforms, to present exhibitions? Clementine just put it that way. The exhibition might be dead. I'm exaggerating. What kind of visitors are we facing in the digital world?
So I call them the art user, which is kind of, maybe it's just me, for example, or it's people in my generation who would call themselves digital natives, who are living out digitalization in their everyday lives, in the Internet of Things, in Work 4.0. So it's just a question of media, and I wouldn't say it's really hard to realize it, but I get that there's so much structure that has been built throughout centuries before, and you cannot suddenly leave that. So there needs to be a good kind of transition towards the future and towards a new audience who expects more than just paintings on a wall, to put it more, to put it really sarcastic.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, Alain, you've been experiencing this nextmuseum.eu. Maybe you just share a little where the experiences are the experiences with rolling out for art to be sent in, objects for putting up exhibitions online. Maybe you just tell us a little bit about how is it working on Next Museum.
Yeah, sure. I must admit that I like to take the viewpoint of the visitor, and I think that like objects are like more relevant to the audience when they are closer to the actual life. Like, of course, an advocate sees the exhibition completely different than a mother of 3 children. So I think participation is for me key, and like getting the visitor involved not only in art education and educational programs, but really in the program itself. And that's why we try out with Next Museum.io. It's a platform for crowd creation and co-creation. Means that we post open calls of different institutions, not only from us. There's also Museum Ulm, and we're looking for other institutions that want a crowd curate together with the crowd an exhibition. And we were really surprised by the overwhelming response. We had like almost 400 people that sent us proposition, artworks, and so on. So I think it's very interesting how to see that a lot of people want to get more involved also in the program, I would say.
Mm-hmm. And if you think that like this, you also have the chance of getting closer to different communities, like Alain is just putting it, I mean, the art user, like you call them, they come from all different backgrounds. They are radical diverse, you could say. So is that the chance in the future to get really closer to these art users, to art markets?
I would say it's one of the main points, actually, to include more viewpoints and more perspectives, and also more approaches to problems through, I don't know, maybe engineers, if it's a specific exhibition, and also through the use of or the knowledge of designers who would bring more into the media insights, like what kind of media should we use, what kind of platforms should we use. And what I really like about Next Museum is that it's so low threshold. It's really easy to participate, and I think that's also one of the main things. So participation, and also a radical diversity that's also within the museums, maybe in the museum boards, where you have those different kinds of expertises gathered.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's why I also did like my sign saying like expert, because in this thinking everybody is an expert.
Yes, yes, exactly.
Maybe it has to do with life experience, and how you view things, how you approach things, and also if you talk about decolonization of museums, how do you look at a collection of a museum? Do you ask the hard questions, like why is that artwork in the museum, and how could we change that? I recently read that one museum changes or sells one of their Jackson Pollock paintings in order to include more female and female artists and people of color into their collection. So that's one radical step into the future, I would say.
One, of course, could ask how important will it then be that there are the experts, in the directing teams? How would you understand it? Like you already referred to it, being an expert, because then you just, with this radical concept, you could say programming. What about programming? What about planning? Will you hand this over to the audience, to outer space?
Yeah, we will absolutely try to make this happen, and I think like also perhaps it's in the museum world nobody like says it like clearly like this, but I think you can learn a lot of from startup culture, for example, from flat hierarchy, from their agile work and so on. So there's a lot of techniques how you can involve more people and creativity, and I think museums can learn a lot of the structures. That's what we are trying like internally, and also like trying really with the visitors to create a program, exhibitions, events, and so on. And also there is a lot of other museums also in Germany, like our partner Museum Ulm is also changing their collection via citizen council. So there's different citizens inside, and they can also change and co-create the whole collection of the museum. So there's a lot of new ways and ideas.
Sounds good. Yeah.
So where are the spaces of, participation, like the theater director puts it, has been putting it in the beginning. I mean, then where should or could we meet, like on a central base? Where do we meet then? Not everything can happen on the digital sphere.
I hope that people still meet in a museum. I really think that museums are important third places, but I think the answer is like good hybrid formats, that on one way you have like you are locally situated, you get an audience from your city, but then you create exhibitions or events that are also on the internet, for example.
Mm-hmm. Eva, you've been researching a lot about this. So, what is your resume? What your conclusion to how of the Museum of the Future could really been installed, and is it then relevant that they still get their money from the public? I mean, we're talking from Germany, for German perspective now.
So the main point of the Relevator, or the twist in it, is that I don't provide the answers, because my main point is to ask the hard questions for museum directors or gallerists, to ask the hard questions like, where does my money come from? Where are my dependencies, for example? And does that influence my way of programming? Does it influence my way of doing museum work, for example? I would agree on Alain on saying that hybrid formats are really the right way to go into the future, to use those media that are already parts of us, that we always carry with us, and also provide an analog space for real life experience, for meeting people, because it's not only about the artwork and about the art, but it's also about the people that are in that institution that come. So maybe it's good to start with the question, like, who are we relevant to when we do this exhibition? Which community do we want to talk to and to invite, like really invite literally into the room? And how can we do that? Like, do we really know those people, and what is important to them? It's really getting down to that simple area of starting from zero. In that case.
Now, will you be answering to this?
Yeah, I was more like referring and thinking about your beginning example of the theater director that sent the people on the street. So I doubt that it's perhaps the best idea, because they're also like, of course, they are like street theater and street art and all this. but how will he make his money from when he is like on the street? So he also needs the structure, and he needs like the audience. And I think the whole it's also very important to think about new economical models, how this can work and has a future. It's because at the moment it's a very dangerous situation for like artists all over the world that have no engagements, no exhibitions, and so on. And how do they earn their livelihood? This is like very important right now. And so structures, museums, funding programs are very important stakeholders and players in this game.
So maybe a word also about, because the speakers have been talking about, of course, the idea of the old idea of the collections. What kind of collections do we, or will we be collecting, putting up together in your concept, Eva, of collecting digitally?
I think it's a very individual question because maybe the concept of the artwork is also being in question in general. Maybe I think it's getting more into media art and having the artwork so in your phone, maybe approachable and always with you. So it's not a question of only digital artworks or only digital collections, but it's also paintings, and you have those. You can digitize your collection, and I think that's really important, and also to make it public. I think that is one of them, a really important point to make it more visible. Because in one of the sprints, I think the first sprint today, she was referring to all those artworks in collections that are not being made public and just sitting and waiting to be made public somehow or somewhere, and which also requires more collaboration within or between museums. And I really like that idea to make more collaborations between museums.
Yeah, and I think like I'm not a big fan of collections that are like static and stay there for years. And you have the classical program, the visitor comes, the artwork does not speak to him. He does not really understand what it's about, and he doesn't care and is not interested, and that's it. So I think in this visionary digital way, it would be very interesting to have changing collections that are perhaps adapted to me, because algorithms know me as a visitor and what is like my interest, or what is my fear, or what is like what I love or what I hate. So perhaps the collection could be like evolving, changing, and there's a buzzword I like, is like life curating, like that things like change in real time inside the exhibition. And I think we have technology and possibilities to make things like this happen. Or for example, another interesting point is that of course all objects refer in a different way to each visitor. So, but the texts that are accompanying is always like static and always the same. So it would be very interesting if I have another explanation, like my digital guide gives me another explanation about the artwork. And so it would be more customized to my personal needs. This would be very interesting.
But that also raises the question of who is the curator of the future? Is it data? Is it an algorithm? Or is it still humans that work with those together?
Absolutely, that's a very nice question, and that's a question we would like to experiment with. We would love to have a kind of artificial intelligence curator based on different machine learning processes, and just to experiment if the machine is a better curator than a human, for example. And so, I think it could be, yeah.
Mm-hmm. So we're swimming far out to the seas. You know the old argument about quality. What about quality? Is it guaranteed that we still will be holding our idea or concept of quality? What would you say? How do we guarantee quality in future museums when we also put in consideration that, of course, museums still will be institutions for learning and for education? So there's a true responsibility, of course.
I would throw in.
Yeah, please.
I would throw in a word or a term that's called return on experience, which is quite common already in the business world. And I think that is increasingly more important because you or as an art user, you would expect more in a museum. You would expect exchange and encounters and experience. And maybe quality is redefined in that sense.
Then I have a big problem with the term quality itself. Like, I'm not sure what it means and who defines the quality and what is a good quality and what is a bad quality. I'm a huge fan of like amateur culture, of trash in the internet and so on. A lot of people would say this is not quality at all, but yeah, it's the personal view that decides.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Like, what is changing is the gatekeepers of who decides what is the quality.
Yes. But maybe that's a good sign because it shows how democratized the museum maybe already is in some sense.
Yes, and this is what Martin probably meant, because the museum, or Andrew, the museum as a civic space, you know, of course, we all come in, we all have the chance, we try not to hold up barriers, and then it's a common way of cooperation, wherever that space might be. So thank you. So maybe at the end of our short and futuristic talk, what maybe in possible 3 to 5 words or thoughts or maybe glimpses from your side, what would be like the brave but mindful jumps to realize a future-oriented museum? What would you say? What is definitely necessary? And what is not that important anymore?
Should I start, or you wanna?
You can go.
I think what is really important is like more autonomy, like radical autonomy would be nice, because one thing that is a bit frightening and dangerous is that a lot of museums are a bit scared, I have the impression, to not that you need to abide to the political correctness. And I think you need to be quite autonomous to have radical positions also in the art world, in the program and so on. And so more autonomy, then like sharing is caring, I like a lot. And I would say perhaps like daring with Greta Thunberg, more daring, more sharing, more autonomy.
I would say transparency and interdisciplinarity is really important. I would call it the parameters of change, or that's how I called it in the Relevator, which also mentions meaning and visibility, for example, and is the museum approachable? And one of the most important parameters of change is the simple question: who are you relevant to? In my opinion.
Well, thank you so much. I think these are wonderful handovers for tomorrow's discussions about museums and power. And nevertheless, Alain, you mentioned it in your input. Don't take yourself too seriously. More humor, more fun in our museum spaces as well. Thank you. We will be coming back to this, and of course, the buildings are important, the architecture. So the conference will just combine all this. Thank you, Eva and Alain. Thank you so much for sharing and for your thoughts at the end of this first day. And of course, thank you out there. And maybe you'd like also to share your 3 essential thoughts on being brave and bright and collect wonderful new ideas for MuseumFutures as well. So see you tomorrow. And thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Bye.